Welcome back, Screamers, and welcome back to another episode full of hot takes and astute observations.
Wait. We didn't agree to any of that.
I thought it was sort of an unwritten rule that we would have. Maybe I should have said obtuse observations.
Right.
But I thought it was close enough. I wanted to give us a little credit with the astuteness and the hot takes of nonsense, right? Anyway, so today we're going to be diving into the world of Satoshi Kon by talking about the director's 4 films, Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, Tokyo Godfathers, and Paprika. Kon died in 2010 of pancreatic cancer, a short but impactful life that has left a lasting legacy. Before we get into that, Jason, what is happening?
Just in general?
Besides the vending machine, just
right, yeah, the vending machine inside was
to engage in capitalism.
This is just not giving me water for some reason. Life has been life. We were talking. I went to see the Violent Femmes over the past weekend, and the opener. I don't want to. I don't look up who it is. Like I don't want to because. Gotcha. He wasn't good. He sounded like Tom Waits wannabe. He wasn't terrible, but it was one of the ones that it was a surprising opener. Like normally you either get a regional person who's pretty good, or if this guy's touring with them, I'm just like, man, this guy's. It's going to be. I mean, I don't know. It's fine. I'm sure.
Was it just one person?
It was just a dude, out there guitaring it up, and like I said, it just was just like, okay, well, you sound like. You want to be kind of a George Thorogood / Tom Waits mix somehow.
That's an odd mix
too. It is. And he just was
with a little Georgia satellites thrown in there.
Yeah, some down home real country jazz, whatever.
Some real country. This is real country jazz. That's Kid Rock's next album.
But then I saw The Cure, which I've been going. This has been a weird it's been a lot of concerts going on right now, and. There was a band from Scotland called the Twisted Sad. I hope I'm getting that name right. And they were amazing. They were really, really good.
Was it not the Twilight Sad?
The Twilight Sad. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes.
The Twilight Sad. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, they were. I'd never heard them before. They were really, really good.
Yeah, they've been around for a while. In fact, I think it's one of the guys from Slowdive.
Okay.
I think the bass player. I could be wrong, but because he's Scottish.
Right. Yeah. He was very, very Scottish. I mean, it sounded like when he wasn't singing, it sounded like Shrek was up there talking about the band and how happy they would be.
Yeah.
It was funny because Robert Smith was like, it's hot here. And I'm like, it's fucking 80. It's not, you're fine, dude. And it's like, I know you're old, but seriously, you're fine. I will say I've never seen Starplex that packed. I mean, that's not Starplex anymore. It's Dos Equis Pavilion or whatever the fuck. But when, the true OGs of Dallas concert going know it is Starplex. I had never seen the lawn that packed ever. It was crazy. We were all the way to we kind of wanted to be, but just so we can get in and out. But it was nuts. I mean, 20,000 people that were there.
And that you just showed your age. One, by going to see The Cure and saying, we sat near the back so we could get in and out easier. Just that tells you, here's the priorities. Right. We want to beat traffic. Right? So I grew up in Indianapolis, and there was a concert venue, the big kind of concert venue there. We grew up calling it Deer Creek, and it was like that. It had sort of the covered pavilion and the lawn. And it's changed names I don't know how many times, right, depending on the sponsor, but we still call it Deer Creek. And so, if you say that, people know what you're talking about. Oh, you mean Klipsch Pavilion? No, I mean Deer Creek.
We're not calling it that, all right?
Yeah, that's not what we're doing. I don't know if that's hipster of us or just it's a refusal to accept the corporate overlord.
Right. Yeah, fuck capitalism, right? I mean, so and we can't talk about everything just because. But there's been a decent amount of indie films that have come out that have been interesting. That we'll talk about it in future episodes. But outside of diving into Kon and Star Wars, that I've been dabbling around. So it's been fine. We keep them busy.
Okay.
It's cool. How about you?
I worry that you're not. No, I'm fine. Look, summer vacation has started, and I've taken a nap every day this week.
Nice.
Yeah. So kind of a week of decompressing. reading books, watching movies, and playing with my dog.
As we get further and further into this collapsing capitalistic society that we have, that's just going to crush itself under its own weight.
It's going to eat itself, yeah.
Which I got on the way over here, a text, a news alert that was saying that scientists think that New York is sinking because of all the weight of its skyscrapers. And I'm like, well, okay, that's a thing that's happening now too, then I guess.
But is that even surprising?
No. It sounds plausible. You would think that you would have noticed it before now. I don't think there was it's not like there was a tipping point of like, oh, well, shit, we added this one. And then that was it. Also, Cheerio, all the basket tips out and everything goes into the sea.
Another interesting story about New York this morning and about other coastal cities, and I know we're not a political podcast, whatever, but we say enough bullshit on here that, sometimes I think we might as well be.
Greta Thunberg.
Right. I was going to try and do an impression of a Swedish, DNA. Yeah. But they were, the Times had a report on the number of college degree earners that were leaving major cities. And they're not being replaced. And so I think there was something like on average 200,000, college degree earners are leaving New York and only 100,000 are coming in. And so there's this deficit with these kind of major coastal cities because everything is too fucking expensive.
Right.
So when even if you have these degrees that we're all told we must have, right, or will never amount to anything, you still can't live in a lot of these places. And so, I mean, like you said, it's just the system's going to eat itself. And
but we're glad you're listening.
Yeah. But this is also, look, notice there are no ads on this podcast, right? I do want to thank Apple for this.
And Goop.
And Goop. That's right. I guess Goop is the one
sponsor
the one sponsor that we have. Okay. All right.
Like I said, like we've said before, we record this while having vaginal eggs inside of us. So it's always having vaginal eggs inside of us. I don't even know what I would do if I didn't have a vaginal egg inside me. Like at this point, I'm more vaginal egg than human. It's just, I feel like I get up in the morning, I brush my teeth, insert my vaginal egg.
This is a weird endorsement for Kegel exercises.
Whenever I'm not talking, listener, I'm squeezing. So anime.
Okay. So I want to start with this question. Well, let me hear.
What is anime?
Just a brief spot on Kon. Along with these 4 films we're going to discuss today, he was also a manga artist, I believe, and he also did a 13-episode TV series called Paranoia Agent, which I looked for but wasn't able to find. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
I was going to watch it and then I ran out of time.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, like all of these films share in some way, I think, really similar themes of the gaze, so female, male, and also a sort of bisexual gaze. A theme of performance, identity, identification, imagination, reality, this idea of perception. And then there's a lot of these like relevant sort of social issues underneath. If that wasn't enough, there are relevant social issues in these films as well. Not just in Kon's native Japan, but issues that we see here in the U.S. So homelessness, abandonment, celebrity, misogyny, and trauma, which seems kind of ever present in all the films.
Yeah, no, I don't. When I was watching these and then reading up about Kon and just kind of reading theses and articles about his work, it was just like we're not going to be able to cover everything.
Oh, no.
And so the reason that we're talking about Kon today, as opposed to DOGG, David Gordon Green, is that we showed Paprika at the Fort Worth Film Club. So we just recently had a screening. It was a great turnout. We had a great conversation afterwards. And that's what we do. We will cover the films of the Fort Worth Film Club that they're screening. So that was a lot of fun and it was good to see it. It's a cool movie to see on a big screen. But that's the reason we're diving into his work. Normally, I would say let's do this one film at a time because almost it's really, they're so dense. The themes are so, I mean, like they said, there's so much to talk about that we won't even come close to doing it justice in the number of hours we have today.
But I mean, I think that's on brand for us.
Right. And we'll forget things that we should have talked about. And
and like tomorrow I'll be like, oh, I should have said this. Or why did I say that? But who gives a shit?
Why did I spend so much time talking about vaginal eggs when I could have talking
about Right. So this question, as you said, so anime, that's my question to you. Look, I have virtually no relationship with anime. And I'm okay with that. It's never been a thing that has caught my attention, although I did, spoiler, really enjoy these 4 films. But I'm curious what your kind of relationship with anime is and how do you approach it?
I am a fan of, let me just say this, adult animation. I do like when it's done well. I do, but I will say that I am not the biggest, I don't have the biggest knowledge of anime. I know people that are dyed in the wool, they live and breathe it. To me, it's kind of daunting just because there's so much content out there. To me, it's kind of like trying to get into comic books as an adult because you need to know, it's hard to know which ones you should read, which ones you should avoid, where you should start, what you can skip, that kind of thing. If I'm getting into, there's other things that, any one of these, there's 20 different seasons and it's like, so the entry point to a lot of this seems daunting. And then because I didn't really grow up with it, like the Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Power Rangers stuff was a generation beyond me. So I would have already been in high school by that time. So I didn't kind of grow up in this Dragon Ball Z era where it was kind of beloved to me. And so it kind of passed me over. Now, I did come back around. I mean, I was, like I said, we talked about before, I was a big J-horror fan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so there's a lot of Japanese influences that I watch. But this was one of those ones that, again, once I've, dabbled here and there. And like you said, I loved all 4 of these films. But it's not something that I need it to be specific, and I need it to be something that I know that I'm not necessarily that I know that I'm going to like, but I know that I'm not going to have to spend 36 hours to try to find and take it all in.
Right. And maybe this is stereotypical, maybe not. I don't really know, but the brief dalliance with other anime I've had is those other anime features are more fantasy based, more sci-fi based. The drawing is even different than these. And I think that's something that puts me off too. So I'm not a huge sci-fi fantasy fan. I mean, I will watch most of the live action stuff just to watch it, but I tune a lot of it out. And these were very much not that. I mean, they were much more cinematic, I think, in their approach.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, like, how you want to classify or what you want to classify as anime, if you want to classify things like Totoro or Where the Wind Rises. I mean, like the Ghibli films, I don't necessarily know if they would go hardcore into the kaiju punching, robots and whatever else. And I not to denigrate any of it, but again, like you said, the sci-fi aspect of it all, again, that requires a little bit of more commitment than just watching a 2-hour film. So that end, like I said, I'm more than open to watch more. Like I said, I really liked these. I'm a rudimentary fan of Akira and a couple of other things that are kind of like the seminal works of anime, but yeah, I don't have any tattoos or I'm not going, I don't have any cosplay options for anime.
And thankfully, you didn't look at me like I had 2 heads when I said I'm not a big anime fan, which is something else. And again, like not to like start a fight with like anime fanboys, but I've noticed it when I'm like, oh, I'm not a big anime fan. People look at me with almost this like look of disdain. And I'm like, listen, I have other things to do.
Right.
I mean, but I think, we kind of talked about this on the last episode where there is a level of fandom, I think, with some of this that you see in things like Star Wars and Marvel and DC, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it just feels like, and like I said, I could be wrong, but that when you talk to someone who is an anime fan, who is a self-proclaimed anime fan, that is the primary source of entertainment that they're getting, right?
Mm-hmm,
They are consuming manga, they're consuming anime shows, and they're arguing that Netflix fucked up Death Note and that type. It's just that or Ghost in the live action Ghost in the Shell was bullshit or whatever.
Or the live action Cowboy Bebop. I mean, all that stuff. I mean,
right.
Whatever. I mean, they can be bad shows and that's fine. But
and again, I don't have any problem with that being the case. It's like I said, but I do think there needs to be a little bit of recognition. And I think it's one thing to be. I think Star Wars is one of those things because again, everyone kind of, at least United States wise, knows Star Wars, right? And it's kind of it's gone beyond that. So it's easy to kind of be a casual person and still talk about certain aspects of it. It's very difficult to be, also because it's not English language. So this is not something you can just passively kind of let wash over you. You have to be engaged, right? So it's there's a level of engagement, a level of attention and intention
like that you have to possess watching these films. I mean, because they're, and especially these four, I think. I mean, because like I said, I haven't watched a lot of other ones, but
Right.
yeah, there's so much going on, dialogue and visually, that you really have to sort of dial in.
My inherent nature to want to please everybody and kind of also seem cool to everyone makes me also like I would kind of, given an infinite amount of time and an infinite amount of ability to watch, I probably would watch a lot of anime. It's
You're
just
also a
matter
completist,
right? Yes, and that's the problem too.
And there's where the two of us differ. Where you know what? I will not watch The Rise of Skywalker.
right.
Where you were like, oh, I have to finish this, and I'm just like, I don't think so. But we had a conversation about that earlier about how I can put things down and just be like, nope. This is not good or not for me, and leave it and be okay with that.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me.
Yeah,
it's that thing where it's just like I kind of hope things always kind of turn and they pull themselves out, even when I know they're not going to.
Right.
And then two, it's I don't know. I've only walked out of one movie, and that was a Tom Twyker perfume movie, which actually everyone says was really good, but for whatever reason,
no,
it
wasn't.
Lost me.
It wasn't.
It lost
it
me.
wasn't. And I really want to be a Twyker fan. What was the one with Clive Owen that he did?
What was that one called? I always lose it. I mean,
but that was not good.
Yeah.
That was not good either. I mean, look. I mean, did he do anything good besides Run on a Low Run? That was it.
I need to go back and look at his filmography. I haven't visited it in a while.
I can tell you that no. No. But also, like, I back to what you said. If people don't think I'm cool, that's their problem. that is a them problem, not a me problem. So
yeah. Well, therapy's expensive, Brock. I mean, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's why I adopt this attitude, because I can't afford it. All right. You want to talk about Perfect Blue?
Yeah, let's talk.
Okay. Before we dive into this, I would like to call attention to the work of scholar Susan Napier, especially her essay, Excuse Me, Who Are You? In the book, Cinema Anime, Critical Engagement with Japanese Animation. It's really informative, really smart look at three of these films. She didn't include Paprika, but she did include the other two, mainly focused on Perfect Blue, but also this.
Yeah, I think what happened is one, like he took, Paranoia Agent comes out between Tokyo Godfathers and Paprika. So there was a lot of ideas that he had that he couldn't formulate into full stories that ended up being Paranoia Agent. So I think there was a lot of work being done and talking about him after Perfect Blue kind of I hesitate to say that any of these like shot onto the scene, but he was definitely a voice. I mean, he never made a whole lot of, his movies never made a ton of money. They weren't ever really all that well distributed over here in the United States. G Kids would pick them up for distribution and things like that, but they never played past an Angelica or our art house films. It wasn't something that you kind of had to be in the know in the US to kind of, and like afterwards, 10 years later, these movies were starting to get accolades and recognition, and Kon was as well, and that kind of falls in line with, I guess, what Paprika was 2007, right? So he started to get. He was a decade in between Perfect Blue and Paprika, his last film.
Yeah. Okay, brief synopsis?
Yeah.
Okay, Mima was a pop idol worshipped by the masses until fashion dictated otherwise. In order to salvage her career, she's advised to drop music and pursue acting. A soap opera role is offered, but Mima's character is less clean-cut than desired. Mima will need to perform in a rape scene. Regardless, she agrees, and events take a turn for the worse as the scene induces trauma. Mima begins to feel reality slip around her, that her life is not her own. She discovers or imagines in some way a mirror image of herself that hasn't given up singing. Internet sites appear describing every intimate detail of her life, and a figure stalks her from the shadows. This is so ominous. Her friends and associates are threatened and killed. As Mima descends into a dangerous world of paranoid delusion, she fears for her life and must unravel fact from illusion in order to stay alive. I sort of want to jump into something real fast. I want to talk about this rape scene, and I want to talk about this idea of rape in films and in writing. So there's an essay in the current New York Review of Books by the writer Elaine Blair talking about how we lack the language to adequately write about, report on, and describe kind of sexual assault. So in part, when we try to do this, when we try to describe these assaults, we can, not by intention, but we can eroticize them. We can make them sound, anytime we say like the word sex, we kind of have this like inherent erotic way that our culture has of looking at this, right? Because everything to do with sex here is kind of taboo, and anything that's taboo is alluring and enticing. So the same idea I see kind of happening in movies. As soon as we see or show a rape scene, it becomes this kind of eroticized moment. And I'm thinking of like the girl with the dragon tattoo, the original one. Mm-hmm. That scene, it's like the director is so in love with that violence, right? I know I'm supposed to be disturbed, but you're making this it's like you're almost trying to make this sexy, and it's not. I think my larger point is that I never need to see another rape scene depicted in film ever again.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I don't know what they're adding.
Yeah, I mean, with you, and again, I haven't gone through and listed out all the rape scenes that I've ever seen, but like in the 70s, that was very much it, right? It was a way to gratuitously show nudity. It was a way to also to show violence, of course. But you look at something like Death Wish or like these movies that had it in it. It was a way to rip a shirt open and show a voluptuous woman topless. And then, potentially, it was always just gross, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, but it was meant to be a quote unquote sex scene in this film, whether it was loving or not. What I think Kon does so well here is that this is a rape scene that she's consenting to, because it's not actually a rape scene. She's not actually being raped,
right?
But I think what Kon does so well here is shows how even a consensual actress who has said, I want to do this. And even if you have men around her who are at certain points still, while they have to be acting violently, when there's a break, they're still kind of concerned about her, asking her if it's okay. Right. How this bleeds over into her real life, into her real imagination, into her thought process, into her psyche. I thought this was probably the thing that Perfect Blue does the best, is show how this kind of like this fetish and this gaze has affected Mima her entirety of her career, and how it is really kind of split her personality, and where she can't ever own it. She can't ever own her own sexuality because she's either a prepubescent doll
she's a living doll,
right? Or she's this over hypersexualized entity that is being manipulated by a perverted director and it's an abusive director and a perverted photographer who's taking advantage of her. Where all she's trying to do is progress her career. This movie, I mean, it's so good. But again, the rape scene, how it bleeds into her real life, and so how it starts to affect her, outside of just, this is something I agreed to do, but this is obviously it's still traumatic. You're not able to extract yourself from that. Again, it's one of those things where I would really love for, and not to re-traumatize any actress who's actually done this or gone through this, but I would really love to see if there's any sort of, and I know this is surreal, right? And this is, it's De Palma and Hitchcock, and so it's kind of twisting, reality. But I would really be interested to know, and maybe there are articles out there or discussions or conversations that are already about this, about whether anybody who's done this had the same sort of thing happen to them, where it's kind of bled over and really, even though they knew that they had some power to say stop to a certain extent, mm-hmm. still did it really affect them outside of the filming process?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said there, because this was something I was thinking about when I was watching it too, even though I was sort of, again, like disturbed and just like, I just don't need to see this anymore. But it is such a kind of meta thing. I mean, all of his films have this kind of meta narrative that run through them anyway, but it's a filming of a scene that's being filmed. I mean, so it's kind of a construct of something else in it. And so I think there is some separation there. And it's not like, so my partner watches that Outlander show. I mean, I don't, but I feel like there's like a rape in every episode of that show. And it's like, I understand.
Well, same thing with Game of Thrones, right?
Okay, and Game of Thrones too. Right. And I understand how it's used as sort of like a power thing in these films, and like, in different times and times of war. But I'm just like, this doesn't need to be here all the time.
Right, yeah.
And but those are different things too. And I think
Because again, I think you have to ask yourself, and regardless of whether or not it's part of the source material, and regardless of whether or not it's part of the supposed life or the times, a reflection of the actual times in which these things take place. As a filmmaker, as a you almost have to, what do you owe, right? To take a step back and saying, or if I'm doing this week in and week out, or if I'm doing this, am I making these sex scenes for people
who have rape fantasies?
Right, who have rape fantasies. And to what extent, like, and again, not that is do you need to put more of that out there, I guess, is the real question, right?
Right.
And I think in this case, I do think, I think he was very prescient about a lot of different things. Also, his female characters and the way that he wrote them, and the way that he just kind of, not even the female characters themselves, but the way he examines the female experience in all of these movies is very, very interesting. And so, like I said, I think, not to bash Khan, I think what he was trying to do is make us look at the ugly side of this and make you look at what kind of impact it has, even if it's not technically a crime.
Right. No, I think so. And I'm in no way trying to sort of bash his decision to do that, because I do see the separation of how, this is a sort of meta moment. And it sort of is, I think, commenting on the nature of scenes like this in films, right? Saying like these can even though these are not real rapes, even though these, this is an act, this is a consensual scene filmed between people, that they can still induce a kind of trauma. And let's not pretend it doesn't.
Right.
And so,
right.
I mean, I think it's a very smart way to sort of talk about that or bring that up. It just raised questions to me as I'm watching this going, I get it, but like, why do I see so much of this? And again, that essay and how we lack language to talk about these things. And it's almost a similar thing. We lack a cinematic language to really, I think, get the point across with.
Right. There's no way to, unless you make it so brutal and so disturbing that you can't watch it. Right. So something like Irreversible, which you can, that can be argued, but that scene is meant to turn you off. That scene is meant to disgust you, as opposed to any other rape scene or sexually violent scene. Like, what's the, I don't know. Yeah. So it's, you're right. I mean, it's difficult to know how we can actually not make that something that
becomes fetishized.
Right. Or rewound and rewatched and kind of just perverted the intent, really.
Yeah. There's a ton going on in this film. And I mean, for my money, this is I think his best, most complex and most interesting. And I have a question about that later, but that'll come at the end of our discussion. But I think one of the things this film does really well is the way it opens and the way that this opening sequence just plays with perception. And the way we kind of continue to shift the idea like of what we're seeing. We go from like screen to stage to crowd to fans, right? To Mima looking at herself in a reflection on a train, to seeing her from behind, almost like she's a marionette, like being controlled. Mm-hmm. And so the way this gaze just changes. I think it really sets up this kind of idea that continues to progress in the movie itself about what are we looking at? What's the real scene? How does this perception and gaze change throughout the film? I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think I think all of it, like especially when you consider when it came out and what we as a U.S. society, I'm sure this happens in Japan, and this is another thing why I think part of a lot of this kind of, a lot of anime kind of maybe shoots past me a little bit because I'm not well versed in Japanese culture, and so there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I mean, obviously you can pick it up. I mean, it's not, and you can gain insight from seeing it. That's not necessarily a reason to stay away, but I mean, it's just one of those things.
Right.
But in this case, where we are, when this comes out, we're doing the exact same thing to Lindsay Lohan and Paris Hilton and Britney Spears, and like we're putting them under a microscope. We're trying to sexualize them virginally, which is a weird way to say that, but but like we're trying to make them into these virginal objects of desire. Right. We're making them sing songs about basically having sex with me, but not having, and then we're surprised and we denigrate them when they do come out and they break out of these,
when they have an actual sexuality,
right? When they break out of these bubblegum roles and that, but and this is not even just to say, females. I mean, and not to say that the Jonas Brothers had this badly, but I mean, we had these same sort of things with Selena Gomez but I mean, all these purity ring bullshit and like all of this stuff that we were so invested in, whether or not, these young starlets had sex before, and these were questions that we were asking them, and it's like, what the fuck are we doing as a society? Yeah. Because we're also putting them in Catholic schoolgirl uniforms. They're on the cover of Rolling Stone and
pigtails,
right? And pigtails and panties and tank tops, and it's just like we're selling posters of that, and it's just like, what the and then we're clutching our pearls when they kiss, when Aguilera and Spears and Madonna kiss each other on MTV, and this is the fucking downfall. Another thing he really did well was, and I saw ahead of time, was the internet stalking and the not only stalking but like impersonation, and like in '97, that's really something that's impressive to have. Really kind of a Selena through point of like, where you have this person who's close to you and who's also like causing you harm because they're jealous of you. And it's that all of this whole like plot line basically seems like it shouldn't have been written. It shouldn't have been available in '97. It seems like it's way too ahead of its time to be in '97.
Right. Yeah. This obsessive fan culture. And because you're also referring to her manager in the film, Rumi. And Rumi was an earlier version of Mima, right? Who suffers some kind of psychosis where she just can't let go, and she sort of takes on the role, right, of Mima, but she's the real Mima, and so she's controlling then like this other guy who. So I want to take a step back and go back to this opening concert scene. And we like really fully establish this kind of male gaze on these women performing, right? Cham.
Yeah, they're like Sailor Moon, basically, right?
Yeah. But we get all these male fans. At first, they're like looking at them through cameras at eye level, right? Taking photos. Then we hear them sort of talking, kind of, gossiping almost about. And then we have this security guard who becomes like hyper obsessed. And so much so that I would argue like wants to be her. Right, yeah. I mean, he's sort of framed with long hair, more feminine features, even if he is kind of grotesque. And so we get this like really kind of established male gaze, and that's there. But then we get this kind of female perspective from Rumi, and that becomes something kind of different altogether, and how it subverts, I think, what we expect. I mean, I don't know, having not seen this really before, I didn't necessarily expect her to be kind of our baddie.
Right. She's the killer, right?
And the gouging of the eyes, right, is kind of a stand-in for this. I mean, again, interesting in sort of how it plays with this idea of the gaze and who's looking and who's observing and who's ogling. But it's also this kind of like stand-in for a castration fantasy. Right. Which again, like another really kind of, I think, clever aspect in how he shifts the power of who's looking, of that gaze idea. And then, I mean, the twist on the Hitchcock De Palma thing with our women, right, are the kind of heroes, are kind of the winners, right? They're not just victims.
Yeah, and that's a nice thing here too, is that I don't necessarily always know if that's where this would come out on Hitchcock and De Palma, to be quite fair, right? Is that, and this is the throughput through his movies, is that, women are the men are the bumbling buffoons, and the women are the ones who are going to come out in the end and actually triumph over this and kind of really expose, the underbelly of what, of each of these little plot lines here. I think it's funny that the first scene to me is so funny because, one, obviously it's disturbing because you're only because you at first you kind of see, like you said, the cameras, and so you're like, okay, this is kind of like a press event, or like maybe even some sort of like store opening, or some sort of like they're out on the street, and then you see the younger crowd, which is younger boys. They're all men, but younger boys, and they start getting into a fight. But and then you pull back, and there's men there, and the lyrics that they're singing are so insipid and like just ridiculous. Like there's no reason a grown man or even a young boy would like this music. It's like they're singing about girl things, like, and again, I don't necessarily mean to be as denigrate, but like young girl things, like as far as normative gender roles go, this is what they're singing for, right? This is a pop group that is intended to be Hannah Montana, right? This is not intended to be where grown men, it's amazing that he did that, because again, it's the whole going back to that. We're gonna sexualize these Disney stars, and we're going to scrutinize every aspect of their lives under this weird, bizarre, and socially acceptable, societally acceptable male sexual gaze. It's so bizarre, and I don't know if we're past it. I don't know if it's just something that we have. Like, I don't see us doing it. Maybe I'm ignoring it to a certain extent because it's kind of gotten to the point where it's just disgusted me and I kind of can see it. I don't know if we're doing that with our young stars now. Maybe we are. I don't know. I just don't know who the young stars are because I'm not really kind of keeping my finger on, thankfully, my finger on the pulse of like who these are. But again, but like and I think weirdly enough, like if I think of like who I think of the young pop stars are, I would say that it probably still happened with Selena Gomez and I'm forgetting the Demi Lovato, but it seems like Taylor Swift was able to like kind of, aside from the fact that we all looked at like every single person that she dated and then so maybe not still, we're still fucked up. All right,
I think our stars are probably I think our pop stars our celebrities that are obsessed over probably come from different areas now.
Yeah,
I mean there's so many, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, whatever, but I think they could probably come from different realms rather than just like pop icons.
It's the 17 magazine still exists, or Tiger Beat, or
Teen Beat.
I mean, obviously, I don't think magazines don't exist as much
What's
anymore.
What's a magazine? These guys are old.
Does anybody read Mad anymore? Come on.
You mentioned Rolling Stone earlier, and someone's like, "What the fuck is that?"
Right.
Apparently, there is a kind of culture of like this young girl, and it's called shoujo. I'm sure I'm getting that wrong, and someone out there, but where, I mean, it's pretty much like as you described, but it's more of like a, I guess, socially acceptable, or kind of like a cultural thing, and part of the appeal is that they are these sort of like vulnerable seductresses. You know, so I mean, again, like to what you described earlier,
right? And even if we don't do it with young actresses, we still dress them up as young actresses, right? I mean, we still have, even if it's legally acceptable, we still then fetishize them to the extent of where they're high schoolers or
I wasn't excusing it.
No. I mean, even then, I mean, like I, recently just saw the Cruel Intentions musical over at Stage West, which is a lot of fun. But I mean, it's not like when I was and when I'm watching that movie and I'm still having fun with it. But again, you can get how it's, I don't know where to draw the line. I mean, so also that's to the point of like, I don't want to sit here and this is not a podcast for me to come off on a high horse and say that I'm completely immune to it. It's not that I wouldn't ever read a gossip site, or I'm so like,
oh, of course.
So, I mean, it's like,
but I mean, that is different than overtly sexualizing a young woman. And I mean, overtly sexualizing to the sort of extent of denigration. Right. I mean, so that's different because I love gossip columns. I absolutely love gossip. Right?
True. No, you make a good distinction, though. I get that.
Right.
And then going back like a generation before, like Britney and Christina, like I don't remember that being happening. I don't remember that happening with like Debbie Gibson or Tiffany or the girls that came out.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Tiffany and Debbie Gibson, but I don't know. I always had a thing for Tiffany. I don't know.
So I don't remember us like really, and like even them, they seem to be able to own their wardrobe. They didn't seem to be as sexualized then. And then going back, I don't remember like the 70s were a completely different time. So if there were pop stars of the 70s, I don't remember them being young girls. And then other than being maybe Mickey Mouse Club type things that were going on there, but I don't remember anything kind of coming out like.
Do you think that like maybe, I mean, so speaking of like Debbie Gibson and Tiffany, do you think it could have also been a race thing as well? Because look, I think I remember hearing more about Janet Jackson and then say someone like Jodie Watley in terms of that, or even Paula Abdul.
Yeah, I still think that comes along. Well,
or is that a little bit after?
I think that comes a little bit after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, once I don't know, but I mean, maybe it's the Nipplegate thing that kind of kicks it into like where we're really starting
like hypersonic gear kind
right.
of. Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so let me ask you one more question about this film. Because I could talk about this like for the rest of our time.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like
yeah.
at some point, it might be interesting to revisit these again because I don't think we're going to do them justice. No, but I want people to go out and there's a ton of stuff that's going on in these.
So actually let me just, this is a blanket question for all the films because I think they're all interesting and again they're all multi-layered. Are they more interesting because they are anime?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so too. I think so because I don't think we're able to get away with what he's able to get away with if it's not. And if this is Perfect Blue and it's his first film and it's not animated, then it's just a bizarre
psychosexual,
right? It's a De Palma or Hitchcock, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's written off as such because he's not going to be able to have the budget to do the things that he wants to do visually. He's not going to be able to split up and to kind of like morph reality into her subconscious and all of that happens. I think that this film works better. And I think, I guess specifically the rape scene, I think that works better because you can still see how it works, but you can still pull yourself back from the horrificness of it all. Mm-hmm. I will say that being a first film, I did think that the limitations on the animation style in this movie that you don't see moving forward hurts it a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of the kind of the muddiness and like the kind of crudeness of the animation style tends to blend characters together. And like, so there wasn't a lot of like disparate facial features between all the, all the members of Cham. And like, so there's things that I think could have been done on a bigger budget better. And I think he probably would have stated that as well, as there was things that he probably would have done differently. I mean, it was a first film, but I mean, from a thematically and a storyline, yeah, I think that all of these, except for maybe Tokyo Godfathers. But even then, I think you're willing to accept the Laurel and Hardiness of Tokyo Godfathers because it's animated and those characters can be, for lack of a better term, more animated and still more believable. Where they don't come off as cartoonish because they are actually cartoons, right?
This is true. Okay.
All right. So heading into Millennium Actress.
Millennium Actress. And Chiyoko Fujiwara was a star actress who suddenly quit at the height of her career. Genya Tachibana is a director who is seeking her out in order to produce a documentary on her life. This film serves as a play within a play. Chiyoko's life spans a tumultuous period surrounding World War II, while her characters in movies span a time period from the Sengoku period, which was like upheaval and civil wars during the 15th and 16th centuries, to a futuristic space age. The personal story of Chiyoko gradually becomes a muddle of reality, dreams, and movies. Each episode repeats a series of scenes of chasing, running, and falling in different situations and times. Her life, the sum of all of these, also repeats various setbacks and revivals while continuing to chase after the man with a key, right, who is almost an illusion. So at its heart, like, this is a love story. Right? Chiyoko always looking for that artist from her past, a romantic figure who seemed to hold the idea of possibility and led her to becoming an actress.
Yeah, that's basically it.
So, I mean, this again is like a continuation, right, on imagination and reality.
You could make the argument that whereas Perfect Blue would be a start of a career, that then the Millennium Actress is the end of a career and looking back on it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of argument to be made about whether or not Chiyoko is a reliable narrator in her own life. Obviously, you've got also the male gaze, a fan gaze of a person who's been obsessed with her the entire time, that's making a documentary about her, and then how he inserts himself. So overall, this is the one that I struggle with the most as far as connecting with, because this one leaves me a little bit cold. But but I also think that there's genius here in the way that he examines how we make up these stories for ourselves and how we tell this idea of how we tell our story, and how Chiyoko's story is told but from the movies that she's making, and then she progresses and there's a blend of reality versus movies versus most likely her imagination of how things actually didn't, because again she's yearning for a love that she never really had and that she's only projected, right? And then you also see someone who is in love with the art, who's in love with her product, and inserts himself only in the moments where she's in movies. So he's puts himself, and I think that's a very interesting way to look back at the audience and see how we do that, especially when we connect with a particular star that we we followed a filmography of, and that we imagine ourselves in, the bits and pieces and parts and heroic parts in their movies, as us as the protagonist and us as the savior. And so I think this does that really, really well. I find the story of the key obviously as a red herring to the whole thing. I mean, obviously, I know that it is, right? It's not like I feel that.
I mean, it's such a MacGuffin, isn't it? I mean, that's
right.
That's.
But I think that it takes away a little bit, like that. I don't know. The MacGuffin to me kept pulling me out of the story of like, why? Because again, the idea, it's what drives everything, right? As far as moving it forward. But obviously, at the end, it doesn't really matter. She comes to realize that it was never really, it's this very Viktor Frankl, meaning of life, right? It's just a matter of you need to have meaning. It doesn't necessarily have to have be meaningful, right? This meaning needs to be meaningful to you. And this idea of trying to always hunt for this kind of perfection that's never really a thing. And then when she realizes that the man that she's loved this entire time has died, and, then really, that's when her career starts to crumble, right? The whole, literally, there's an earthquake on a movies, and her career ends at that point because she realizes that the thing that she was striving for, the thing that she was doing all of this for, is no longer there. So she's just going to stop because now there's no meaning. Coming back around full circle when they come back to her and they make a retrospective of her career, saying, "Well, here's the key." It wasn't ever, and then she realizes it wasn't ever really about that. I was just moving forward, So I think this is his most complicated one for me from a perspective of like trying to kind of really grasp onto it. But I still love it. It just kind of misses the thread for me just a little bit.
Yeah, I think this sort of blurring of life and art is really compelling and really fascinating because I think this is so much of how we actually go about our lives, whether it's music or visual art or film or books, right? We're always sort of using those things to help explain the quote unquote real world. And to go back to this other idea of perception, so much of reality, not to be cliche or hackneyed, right? But so much of reality is how we perceive it. You and I look at this room in a completely different way because we're different people. That's not to say that like one way is any more true than the other.
Right.
And I think that's part of this film too. It's like, how do we use these things to help explain the world we live in and the world that we kind of inhabit? I also like how this film seems to be saying something akin to its process over product. It's a film about asking these questions, about trying and failing and falling, right? It's about sort of holding on to your ideas and principles rather than sort of reaching an apotheosis or an apex. And then back to this idea about the gaze that you said, because this is interesting in how the gaze works here, because it's not just her gaze or her storytelling or us watching her, but it's this film director, right? Again, watching her as well. So this kind of, these two gazes coming together, but then there's also a third gaze and the cameraman that our film director brings in, who also ends up in these kind of fantasies, right? And he's like, I feel like a stalker. Right? He even sort of brings this up, which I think is great, but these three gazes kind of merge together to produce something much more positive than Perfect Blue. Perfect Blue, we also had kind of a male gaze, female gaze kind of mashup,
right?
But in a kind of a negative, subverting way. And here it's a much more sort of positive, romantic gaze, not just on the people in the film, but on history as well,
right?
In the past.
This is much more of an uplifting kind of love letter to not only Japanese cinema but Japanese history, and I do think the cameraman serves as a nice surrogate for the audience, and because again, this one is. I think this one you gain the most out of, well, it's hard to say because Paprika is so dense, but this one I think takes a little bit more intensity to watch because there's what he does with the animation styles and blending it so perfectly from real life to the movie set to all of this, like every scene, like, and it, again, almost like really literally every scene, like it's a misdirect. She turns around and then turns back around and there's swords in her face, or she's in a different costume. And it just does that. So like if you watch this is not a movie you can watch casually and really pick up on anything. So I think the cameraman serves as a surrogate for us because he's always like, what the fuck is going on? Like I don't even know what's happening here.
There's also Chiyoko is, I think, pretty much accepted as a composite character of Setsuko Hara and Hideko Takamine, two kind of big stars around the same time of that she would have been acting. And so I think if you're familiar with, not you, but anyway, right. If you're familiar with Kurosawa or Ozu or the kaiju movies, you would have seen one of these two actresses. And then you see the references in the film as well. You see sort of Throne of Blood. You see her posing with a Godzilla type monster, and you see sort of the pre-war stuff.
So it's all of that. It's really those aspects of it. And like I said, if you're a fan of Japanese cinema, which you've probably already seen this, but if you're a fan of Japanese cinema and haven't seen this, like I said, it really is just a love letter to all of those types of movies, and captures all of them really, really well. As far as like the much to say about this one, there's not, I don't know. This one blends so perfectly well with Perfect Blue that you could almost make, aside from the fact that, again, Perfect Blue is at its core, a stalker mystery, a psychosexual kind of thriller type thing. And this is so different than that, but it is interesting. Like I say, it's almost like a palate cleanse. A same type of story, but a palate cleanse, like you said, told from a different perspective, told from a more uplifting perspective. I think there was some like really beautiful. The visuals in this one really were just stunning. The space scene, like the opening rocket launch and rocket launch was just so well done.
It's almost like Kubrickian in the way it opens.
Yeah, it really is. And then. Some of the scenes where she's running through the snow and then she finds herself in the painting, and like, there's just some of that that's just, I mean, obviously a lot of this is when she's talking to, it's very heartbreaking about how she's like she stopped because she realized not only is he dead, but he wouldn't recognize me. I mean, she finds the painting that he painted of her on the wall, and she took that down and it has it mounted and it's framed. And she realizes that's who he sees me as. And that's a really interesting point too. They don't really like dig into that too much, but like,
because it happens towards the end.
Right.
And then she kind of, dies soon after.
Right.
But it's like that sort of like final acceptance, right? Because even at the end, and look, I guess I'll mention this now. I don't like the endings of any of these films. I find them all to be too cutesy and on the nose. Right? So like in this film, she's kind of, the film ends with her sort of back in a movie scene and going, like, launching off into space in this rocket. And I mean, the last thing she says is, it was about the journey anyway. And I'm just like,
right.
Like, we got it, right? But that idea of like, he wouldn't this is who he sees me as, not who I became, is really interesting. But it's also like why she became an actress, right? So that he would sort of recognize her in some way. But as an actress, I mean, she's adopting persona. I mean, again, there's these ideas of sort of identity and identification within this film that I think we probably could have dug more into, like you said, but are still there. And they're still being played with. And
this one misdirects a little bit too with I mean, obviously I just said that every scene was a misdirect, but what I mean is with the jealousy through line of the older actress who steals the key from her, and then that ends up with her marriage to the director. As she's kind of she's lost the key, she's lost herself, she's lost so she just gloms on, or she latches onto the next male that's available to her. I don't know if those are fully explored, to be quite honest. I think that those seem to be like things we would expect to have happened to a young ingenue, but it doesn't really propel her story aside from just being anecdotal pieces of information for her. And like I said, it's easy to get caught up in the visuals of this one. Like I said, this one to me is my least favorite. Not that I dislike it. It's just it doesn't visually. I think maybe the most stunning one that we have. But again, it's the one that's like kind of a little bit detached for me.
It was good. I mean, it was good. Again, I dug it. Super meta. But I think Paprika is probably the most meta of all of them. Anyway. Yeah, let's talk about Tokyo Godfathers real quick then. So middle-aged alcoholic Jin, teenage runaway Miyuki, and former drag queen Hana are a trio of homeless people surviving as a makeshift family on the streets of Tokyo. While rummaging in the trash, Hana is looking for books to give to Miyuki. on Christmas Eve, they stumble upon an abandoned newborn baby. The film then becomes a journey, both literally in the search for the baby's parents and spiritually for each of our three characters and what they discover or rediscover about themselves. There's so much humanity in this film. It's so much humanity.
Like, again, when we talk about movies like The Birdcage and like how, like this one that doesn't even fucking blink, that your main character arguably is a transvestite, not transvestite, sorry, it's a transsexual woman.
But I guess transvestite is the right.
I don't
mean, look, she reminds me of Eddie in Funeral Parade of Roses.
Right. Sure.
Right.
Sure. Right.
And Eddie called themselves transvestite. Right. I mean, nomenclature. I don't know. Like, I mean, here's our sort of like apology.
Right. And Hannah had appeared in drag earlier. I mean, like she was a drag performer.
She worked in a club very much like Eddie did,
right? And she identifies as a female. Mm-hmm, I mean, but she also understands the limitations of where she is as well. I mean,
but she really was eating for two.
Well, weirdly, this is the most accessible of his films. I mean, like this story has, like you said, has so much fucking heart to it, and it's so like of all the cutesiness of all of the three that were all the four, this one's I think the most forgivable because it's a wonderful life. Like you wouldn't expect anything different, but from a story that's told from Christmas to New Year's, and it's just it's like everything that fucking happens is ridiculous. Everything is coincidental, and like Tokyo's this huge place, but everybody like all over the course of the night, these three godfathers all find their way back to their real families or uncover them or have some sort of therapeutic moment that allows them to, to, I don't know, to kind of like reclaim themselves. Even the parents of Kyoko, is it Kyoko? That's the baby's name?
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Even the parents, which aren't the parents, but when we find out that, so they find this baby that's been abandoned. We find out through a series of events later on in the movie that the baby was actually taken from the hospital from a couple that's about to split up because the husband has gambling problems and the wife thought that she would steal the baby. Her baby died, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, her baby died. Yeah. And she thought that this baby would bring them back together and they could stay together. But she's like postpartum and almost suicidal. And
she is suicidal.
Right. And so so she steals the baby from the hospital. The husband abandons the baby. Is stumbled upon by these three homeless people, and their Christmas miracle is to get it back to its parents, but also to kind of like fulfill voids in their own lives. The young girl she's a runaway because she stabbed her father,
and she clearly has other issues there.
Right.
I mean, there's something there that's unexplored, which I think again is like why she ended up homeless and why she ran away in the first place.
And so the man, what's his name? I forget his name.
Jin.
Yeah, thank you. He has gambling problems of his own. And so he's kind of estranged and embarrassed about his own situation. And then Hannah had a violent outburst because of some sort of like a sexual assault in the club. And she's no longer able to kind of live the life that she had been living as a lounge singer. So now they're all three homeless. So now they're trying to find get this baby back to its parents. And, through a confluence of events, they all start to figure, you basically learn more about them. We end up on a rooftop once they know that the baby's been stolen, and all three of them and the baby, the mother who stole the baby, all fall off of they don't all fall off the roof, but the baby gets caught in Hannah's arms. Hannah falls off the roof and a gust of wind blows up
it's like a banner.
The banner that she fell and he's grabbed onto, and it blows her up, and then she can very gently go back down to the ground. And it's a wonderful life. It's all over. Yeah. It's fine. Everything's happy. And again, they've all kind of reconnected in a way and basically learned through that these three godfathers who had given up on themselves realized that the people that they left behind never had really given up on them, and they're worried about them, and so they can potentially go back to the lives that they had before, and we're all have redemptive arcs, literally.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and this, the ideas here, at least that I find so fascinating, are these ideas of family, right? What make up a family? What do we want from our families? What do we owe our families? And I think that there's this real theme of like performance in the film as well, especially from Hannah. Hannah gets to sort of play the role of mother, the role that she wants to play more than anything. And Jin gets to play this role of good father, right? To the teenage runaway as
Right.
well. You know, these roles that he failed at before, and he knows that. Hannah performing this role that she wants but can't naturally have, I guess, is the right. She can't give birth to her own kids, and so she's sort of taking on this role as well. And she, to me, is sort of like the driving force of making everyone realize what they've done, what they've lost, and sort of confront them, and sort of forces everyone to confront themselves, and including herself.
And the story that we've laid out, there's so much more going on.
There's
a mafia through line that goes on, and then there's a scene with a Spanish man that is shooting someone in the mafia because he's been swindled. What I love about that, and I think what's so like really, really well done in this movie is that when we get to the Spanish house and there's no subtitles for the Spanish,
right?
So I thought that was so well done. Like that's just such a genius level move where you're like, oh yeah, our characters wouldn't understand this. You're not going to understand it either unless you speak Spanish, right?
But I love how Kon also brings in these other social, like real social issues. So not just Hannah, but this idea of homelessness and like who do we abandon, right? Who do we sort of literally who do we throw out? Who do we throw away, right? And why do we do that?
Yeah, and their kind of struggle with it as well, right? I mean, like their struggle with not only the personal demons, but then just the matter of like them, realizing who they are and they're outcasts. And there's a conversation they have about how they're, rating the offerings at Christmas time in a cemetery. And this all these kind of like, them put him on themselves. And even when they save the mafia man from the client that's running over him, and they get invited to his to his daughter's wedding, and they don't really know how to behave there either, right? And it's there's like I said, this movie is like all of his movies are jam packed full of that nothing ever stops really, but this one is like everything is just so crazy. And it's not all just comedy either. There's a scene where some young men beat up Jen another homeless man and like brutally beat, and that's not bloody to the extent where you would think. I mean, it's not gross bloody, but I mean, it's a brutal beating that they take. It's not fun, and it's really like they nonchalant for them. They take a phone call and it's and then they're not talking about how they basically said they're cleaning up the streets and it's yeah. So
but again, that's like Kon turning this like gaze, this lens back on society itself and saying like this is how callous some of us are towards people like this. The thing that you didn't say about the older homeless man was that he was already dead when they beat him up.
Right.
Jen had rescued him off the street and taken him back to wherever they're staying and sort of made him comfortable, as he was dying. And they still just beat this corpse to shit. Again, reinforcing this idea of look how shitty we are to these people. They're still people.
This is the first one that feels like an anime film to me. Where because when Jen's riding the bike and he's learned that the baby's been stolen and the mother's not they've given the baby back to the mother who stole it from the hospital, and Jen knows that she stole it. Because he's all pissed off because he saw a news article or a news report basically saying that it was stolen. He's like, we didn't steal it, we found it. And they're like, no, it was stolen from the hospital. And like, oh shit, that's like that's so like he's riding his bike, and it's a really cool scene where he's riding his bike. He passes Hannah and the girl, and he stops and he like falls off the bike, and he's like running all very much like what you would think a traditional like Japanese anime. So he's making all the exaggerated facial expressions and arm limb movements and things. This one feels like it's more steeped in traditional anime styles than Millennium Actress or Perfect Blue are for sure for me. I would say this movie really, if you want to jump into one, it's not heavy. This is I think there are heavy themes here, but this is the funniest one to me. This is the most easily accessible.
And it's the most straightforward.
Right. Yeah. There's not a lot of blending of. There's some, but very, very little blending of.
It's more like traditional flashback, I think, as well, right? I mean,
I do love the scene where the baby turns to the mother that stole it and was like, basically, it's going. I mean, I don't forget exactly what the words were, but it was like, it's gonna be okay. Their eyes open up and
I was going to make a spice joke, but I don't know. It's lame. Okay, so Paprika. In the near future, a revolutionary psychotherapy treatment has been invented through a device called the DC Mini. Therapists are able to act as dream detectives to enter into and explore the unconscious thoughts of patients. Before the government can pass a bill authorizing the use of such advanced technology in therapy, one of the prototypes is stolen. In the wrong hands, the potential misuse of the device could be devastating, allowing the user to completely annihilate a dreamer's personality while they are asleep. Renowned scientist Dr. Atsuko Chiba enters the dream world under her exotic, it's not really the right word, but I don't really quite know, under her alter ego codename Paprika, in an attempt to discover and stop the dream terrorist. I'm sure that I've mispronounced all of these names today.
It's okay.
And again,
we apologize. Right.
So
somewhere out there is like mispronouncing Brock.
Ignorant, yeah.
Bruca?
Right. It's okay, good, yeah. So I think the meta narrative in this is the most pronounced. I mean, what I left out of that synopsis is this like through line of our detective who wanted to be a filmmaker.
Right. This whole thing, everything about this movie is it's repressed selves, right? This whole thing of like the dream world is a representation of our repressed selves. And then this idea, again, I think you could watch this one 1,000 times and come away with something different each time. Like, what is that actually saying that like unfettered or our complete unrepressed selves also then leads to chaos? This idea that, and again, this is what, so I would love to be able to talk to Kon about this just kind of at length, just because when I'm watching this, I kind of had this weird malaise come over me today, because I was just like, this is a movie about immature, ineffectual men, and they're trying to control the world around them. And then when all of them try to do that, the world basically implodes and crashes down on it. And it becomes this like nonsensical mess of humanity that is unsustainable. There's so much to unpack about this. And then this one too, we talked about this at the screening though as well, is that there's so much here that I don't exactly know how to feel about. The smartest man in the world, the person who's invented the DC Mini, which they say DC Mini a lot of times in this movie, which is a little annoying, but other than that, is this morbidly obese scientist. How do you feel about, like, is that just characterized in his infantile nature and just to show him as kind of this kind of man baby? Because they bring it up. And it's weird for me from a Kon perspective, because he's so usually respective of this type of, demeaning language, but they bring it up to demean him. He's either so used to it that he doesn't like register it, or he just doesn't register it because he's so smart in a clinical sense, that from a societal sense, he can't pick it up. He doesn't really understand that it's a bad thing. But the first time we see him, he's stuck in an elevator. Chiba brings it up over and over again to talk about how, basically disgusting that he is, and that
she's like, get your shit together. Right.
This is ridiculous. Like, you can't just continually overeat. I don't know. What are your thoughts on like that piece of it? Because to me, it stands out as something odd.
It's weird, because one of the notes that I made about Tokyo Godfathers is how he does not look down on these people at all.
Right.
But here he kind of, it seems like it's for effect. It seems like but it's also like, this is the guy who in some ways, I guess he doesn't really like save the day, but he has a more integral part to play than just being a kind of oaf. And so I don't know if he's just doing it for effect. I think it's kind of unnecessary. He can be a slob. He can be a man baby. He can be a sort of man child without having to be, what we typically turn our noses up at or look down upon. And so I don't know. One of the things that I think is that he wants to surprise us at the end, because Atsuko ends up marrying him, right? So Dr. Chiba, who yells at him all the time for being like, fat and slobbish and oafish, they end up together. And so I don't know if that is, but then again, I mean, that's problematic in itself, as we see in like all these terrible sitcoms here, right? The the slubbish man ends up with the too hot wife, right? Or the you know what I mean?
No. I got it.
And it also seems like it's for comedic effect too. And I just
and
but why?
Right.
I mean, really, why? And there are a couple why questions, and I don't know that I want to. I don't know if we want to get into that right.
No, I mean, we can't. I think we're going to bounce all around over Paprika. Because the whole movie is a fever dream, right? If you're watching watching this, the best thing that I personally think you can do is kind of turn your brain off. Not turn your brain off, but stop trying to follow the plot.
You have to suspend disbelief. That's fine.
And just kind of let yourself go with the insanity that you're seeing on screen, because it's beautiful. It really is like...
No, it is.
Visually speaking, this is a fucking carnival. This is just so much fun to watch. And like I said... Man, and again, you can see its influences on Nolan and on all of these filmmakers. That there's a scene where the policeman is watching Paprika be molested, and we'll get into that in a minute too. And he pushes his face through the screen to get into these. I mean, there's just so much like that is so visually arresting and interesting, and it's a lot of fun to me to watch. I really, really love this movie, but from a visual aspect, I think it's damn near perfection.
Yeah, it just dawned on me that, Aronofsky took a lot of influence, especially from Perfect Blue, but he must have taken it from this one too, for The Whale.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry. But I mean, going back to this, like, I really don't know why he has to be so big. I think it's just, I mean, this was... I don't want to always like put things off like, well, it was the time and it was just kind of.
And I'm okay with him. I'm okay with him being big. What I'm weirded out about a little bit is why Chiba decides egging him, especially when she clearly. I will say this. I don't necessarily know if you can say that she clearly has feelings for him. That makes apparent sense. I mean, maybe after the fact it does. Chiba and Paprika are two sides of the same coin, right? Mm-hmm. Paprika is also the embodiment in the repressed self that Chiba can't be, because Chiba's got to live in this male-dominated world, and she's got to put on a persona. She's got to dress differently. She's got to pull her hair back. She can't be this Cupid doll, like cute entity, kind of like short hair pixie girl that exists.
But also dream spy.
Right. Who can do anything and can manipulate anything in the world and really help people navigate the repressed selves in this dream world. So, okay, you can make an argument that Chiba has to put down that she's portraying manly or, kind of bullying or brutish, or, she's trying to assert herself in a male-dominated world by doing what she would expect something to be done, or maybe she's trying to throw people off the scent that she's attracted to.
Right.
I don't know.
But back to this theme of performance, right? She's performing a different kind of role. She's performing this, male kind of role, right?
Right.
This is how boys talk to each other.
But that's not enhanced at all by her calling him fatty.
No, and I agree. And so so all of these like explanations we can come up with don't make it make sense.
Right. Right.
And you get the idea that they have been friends for a long, long time. Because he calls her Atsu, I think. Like
Atchan, yeah.
Atchan, sorry, thank you. But it's more of a familiar, and she's like, don't call me that at work or whatever.
Right.
And so you get the idea that there is a kind of closeness there. But again, the kind of like, because at another like cutesy ending, and now I'm Mrs., so-and-so. You're kind of like, that comes out of nowhere.
Right, and the love story doesn't seem to be two-sided either. Because the scientist does not seem to be interested in anything other than
science.
the DC Mini and making his invention better, right? I don't.
Is this a way though to show? Is this a way to sort of show women in a stronger, more powerful mode?
Maybe.
Where, she is multifaceted. She is, and yes, even though she adopts this different persona and she sort of undertakes this kind of role of performance in the real world and the dream world, she is more in touch, more in tune with the world, with herself, with her feelings, with her understanding of everything else around her than these men who are just sort of like single-minded and hyper-focused on things.
It seems to me that she loses the thread a lot of times of where she ends, and where she ends and Paprika begins, and she clearly. It almost seems like she feels like she's given up too much of herself, because like Paprika clearly is the object of desire for all of the other men, right? And so she's removed that object of desire, and so she can be accepted, right? And I don't know, like. I don't know if it really works for me when they come back together at the end and they, destroy the bad guy. I don't know. I would maybe need to go back and pay a little bit more closer attention to once we get back into the real world and the crisis has been solved and we've solidified reality again. Whether or not, I know she seems to be a little bit more jovial and a little bit more balanced, but it's such a harsh, because again, that's such a crescendo of just a visual feast, right? Of all the things that are going on, to basically, and you go up and she's, you're gazing up at her naked body from,
right.
And as she's come back together as Paprika and Chiba. So I don't know, because I don't know if it really, really works for me on the perspective of what are we trying to say about Paprika? You've named this movie Paprika. You didn't name this movie Chiba, right? So I mean, this is a story about, about that entity and how that's going to save everything that's going on here, solve the problems. I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if her coming back together. And then again, you make the argument then, okay, so if now not everyone's split, but now that everyone's had a glimpse into their repressed selves, and I know the cop, the detective is able to kind of make amends with his past. But do we see that in, obviously the bad guys are disappeared, they're gone, right? I mean, and do we see that with the scientist or anybody else? I don't know. There's not enough epilogue here to kind of really kind of fit your head around what the world is going to be tomorrow in Paprika after all of the events. You're honestly kind of lulled to sleep a little bit because everything else that's going on in the dream world is so chaotic that you're just kind of relieved, oh shit, well, we're good now. We've got the world back to normal. I was supposed to kind of follow a character arc. But yeah, I kind of forgotten, and now the credits roll, and here we are.
yeah. I mean, this was the toughest movie for me to engage with, at least maybe on an intellectual level, where it's the one that left me probably the most. I don't know if cold is the right word, but it's the one that left me kind of just puzzled. I think more than. I mean, look, it was a feast for the senses, right? Mm-hmm. It was a feast for the eyes, but other than that, I think the animation style, as he's progressed, obviously, is leaps and bounds. It's 10 years later, but it's a different animation style and what he's able to pull off. Well, it's digital now. Right.
I
mean, because everything else was
I think Millennium Actress was also
the last hand drawn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the first two were hand drawn, and the last two were. Technology's progressed, and so there's
the other thread for me that really kind of broke me in Paprika is that all of the men, all of them are ineffectual, immature man babies.
Hashtag all men.
Hashtag yes, all men. And so I would also want to ask Kon about the sexuality in this film.
Yeah, that's what
because the scene where, and I forget okay, so there's a character in the movie who is impressed and in love with Chiba, as Chiba exists in the real world. He's not as smart as her. He looks up to her, but he's also intimidated by her in that sense. So he's the one who stole the DC Mini. He's the one who's pulling all this together. He's also being kind of controlled by the corporate overlord who wants to stop production of the DC Mini, but only so he can control the world. Basically, it's a misdirect on his part. He's upset that it could fall into the wrong hands, but it's already fallen into the wrong hands, and
which are his,
right? Yeah. And which is a really cool visual scene when those two guys when he comes out of his neck.
Yeah.
But that scene where he is assaulting Paprika. He's and he puts his hand near her crotch and then kind of runs it up her body. And a cool scene. I mean, I don't want to say cool.
It's visually arresting,
right? Because his hand's going up through her body and goes up into her face and under her skin, and he basically exposes Paprika or exposes Chiba as being underneath or being the true self of Paprika. But the sexuality of that scene, and again, we can talk going back to the sexuality of rape scenes or sexual assault scenes. That one is still very clumsy and very when he fondles her breast, and it's all very man baby-ish. It's all very stumbling and not really. I mean, it's not knowing. And again, I'm not going to try to argue whether a sexual assault should be knowing, right? I'm not trying to but the effect of it all, because he puts his hand on her crotch and it kind of goes in, and it's it goes into her body, not And it's sorry, I don't know how to like navigate this. I'm a fucking man baby as well.
We talked about the limitation of language to talk about these things, and so I don't think it's an accident that we're kind of like, how do I say this in a way that isn't
right?
That isn't sort of like one disgusting, but also then again like fetishizing it. So.
But those scenes, I want to know what he's saying with that, because clearly that's a sexual act. I mean, I know it's assault. That is clearly a sexually assaulting act that he's doing to her, splitting her essentially in two, ripping off her skin.
And it's an act of penetration.
Right. And that's bizarre to me too, because again, it comes out of fucking left field too. Like, there's so much that's being done visually in this movie where you're like, and you're so caught up in the nonsensical words that are being said and like, animated boom boxes and toasters and refrigerators and like all this cacophony of like dolls that are just like morphing into. It's beautiful and it's amazing,
but it's weird.
But it is weird, and it just kind of lulls you to sleep. To like, I think that some of the storyline that we're trying to develop here doesn't quite hit its mark because it's just not well explained, because we're so busy in look at all the cool shit that I can do.
Yeah. I think there is, right. I think that the story does suffer for that. I think going back to this bad guy who sort of splits Chiba, he also seduced or was allowed to be seduced by another male scientist who then he stole the DC Mini from. And then we find out that he's also having a sexual relationship with the big bad. And so I think this provides a kind of interesting juxtaposition between who he is becoming in this world and who he thinks he should be, right? He thinks that he should be, assaulting this woman. He thinks that he should be with this woman, right? And that she should love him too. But also he's engaging in these other, more or less true, I don't know, acts, right? To get other things that he wants, namely sort of power or close to power. So I think that's interesting as well. And is that why he's so fumbling with her during that kind of assault scene? Because he doesn't.
Right.
Like,
he doesn't really.
He's like, this is how it's supposed to be, right? I mean, that the sort of like teenage boy mind of like, this is sex, right?
Right.
But I don't know, because that was a question for me watching this as well. I was like, wait a minute, like, does he think he's supposed to be this, but this is who he really is? This idea again of like repressed selves.
Yeah, it's a weird queer energy that doesn't quite get it's weird again. We talk about all the things that like Kon does so well with female protagonists, and he mentioned in an interview that he wrote for females because it was.
Do you want the exact quote?
Yeah,
I have
please.
it. I have it. No, I like women. It's because female characters are easier to write. With a male character, I can see only the bad aspects. Because I'm a man, I know very well what a male character is thinking. On the other hand, if you write a female protagonist because it's the opposite sex and I don't know them the way I know a male, I can project my obsession onto the characters and expand the aspects I want to describe.
And I think that plays out perfectly in Paprika. I think the 5 male characters that he writes here are only all bad. I mean, like, they have redeeming qualities and they're not all bad guys, but they all suffer. They all suffer from the same narcissistic and this idea of like men can't tap into their true feelings and all of this is repressed. And I think that's limiting when you're talking about all 5 of these characters having the same afflictions.
Yeah.
And then, but also you're trying to make these characters complex, right? The bad guy in Perfect Blue is also a female, right? It's easy for him to put himself in Millennium Actress as the interviewer because it's him telling the story, and that guy has nothing really to do other than project his life. He really is not a character, right? I mean, he's just a guy that propels the story along.
He's a fan. I mean,
right. I mean, he's another surrogate for who we are.
Right.
Watching this. Tokyo Godfathers is completely different because it's telling a different story. But in this one, you can't have all of them be different parts and then all be the same character essentially. And so yeah, it's a little like especially when you're trying to write them as complex, right? This idea of one of them being a big fat man baby and one of them being a repressed homosexual, right. Or maybe not even a repressed homosexual, but potentially bisexual, or maybe he's just a homosexual that also realizes that in a man world that he has to want or desire, and that's the reason he likes Chiba, and that's an interesting point, is that reason he rips Paprika open is because Chiba is more of the man portion, the male, the masculine aspect of that character. So there's things there. I just don't know if this movie knows how to handle all of them that well. And then again, by the time you get to the hour and a half mark, and we've gone through and we've looked at some really, really cool shit, that we can all take a breath and like, okay, well, that's fun. That was cool to watch, but I don't know thinking about this, whether or not it's
like, is there any there?
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I really like this idea of Chiba embodying more of the masculine role than I like the idea of Chiba embodying the masculine role that he wants to embody, but is having a hard time doing. And that is why, right, he wants to sort of, or that is why he finds himself assaulting her and also drawn to her.
Right.
I mean, that's compelling. That's interesting. But again, like none of this stuff is really dug into or explored.
It's too much. There's too much. Like, it's one thing, like if you look at something like Inception, where it's just around, that's done as a thriller, right? And there's a more of what we're trying to do in Paprika is this exploration of who we truly are and who we truly are when we're asleep, and this idea of like what happens if all of those desires and dreams come to fruition at the same time. Like that's fucking you can write books on that.
I'm sure they have. I'm sure someone has.
So yeah, visually stunning. And I think I like it, but I agree with you that this is the more difficult one for me to kind of to wrap my head around it, and really because I want to ascribe so much to it
that isn't there.
Right. I mean, or if it's there, it's just not that well explained,
or it's really opaque. Right. And this is not to say that this film was Hootie and the Blowfish. right. I mean, I think it's a little deeper than that.
Sure.
But at the same time, I think it stops short at really kind of exploring some of these ideas.
Yeah, I don't think it's a complete failure by any means.
No.
I just think that his ambition overshot his ability to tell this story in a 90-minute story. Mm-hmm. Maybe if you give it another 30 minutes, which I'm never really a proponent of like elongating movies, but I mean, in this case, if you had to give it another 30 minutes where we could sit with these people afterwards and see how they kind of, and they don't all have to wrap up neatly. They don't all have to like have this big revelation or resolution or, even growth for that matter. But you do need to be able to take a step back and say, okay, look, all that insanity happened. And now you don't end the Godzilla movie after he's torn up New York and he goes back into the ocean. You still have a little bit of like time to like kind of decompress and say, okay, well, now we got to rebuild, right?
Right.
Paprika.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on. Let's recommend some films for people if they liked these films.
So how did you go into this?
So it was kind of a vibes recommended if you like, but I did try to sort of pair up, in some way a film with a film.
Okay.
So I did try to find, some connective tissue between what I was recommending and the original, but I have no other anime recommendations.
Okay.
So I did all sort of like, live action narrative films.
All right. Well, I took the exact opposite.
Excellent. Good.
I went with all of my films are animated, and they're not all necessarily kind of same. We'll get to it, but they're all of my films are animated.
Do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
You go ahead.
Okay. So I'm just going to kind of go in order. So the film, actually films that I picked for Perfect Blue, again, this was much more of a vibes thing, much more on the idea of imagination and reality and sort of past and present and future kind of merging together. I recommend the films of Be Gone. Mm-hmm. Do you know Be Gone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love one. Kaylee Blues is just incredible and amazing. But the one that I really wrote down was Long Day's Journey into Night, the 2018 film, which is kind of this like surreal existential detective story. He took the title from the Roberto Bolaño novel, where a man goes looking for a woman from his past. Like the last hour is this single take 3D shot.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And I saw it the theater's no longer there. But at the Magnolia in Dallas, I think there were 2 of us in the theater. But, and I put those 3D glasses on. I was like, this is amazing. I'm so taken with this guy's, with his movies. And he has a new short that's on Mubi that's really interesting and compelling as well. So, yeah, Long Day's Journey Into Night by Be Gone.
All right, cool. My first one is 2004's Mind Game, directed by Masaki Yuasa and Kuji Morimoto.
Okay.
It is obviously all mine are animated. It's an animated movie, kind of like Paprika in a sense, but all of the animation styles are wildly different. And even in the movie itself. So on its surface, it's about this kind of like perpetual loser who gets shot while his girlfriend is being raped by this hockey player, by this like psychotic hockey player. He's able to fight his way out of heaven to come back to Earth and grab his girlfriend, and then they end up getting swallowed by a whale. And then it is a 90 some odd minute just complete mind fuck. And if you're willing to let yourself go with it, it is the craziest shit you'll ever see. It's streaming on Shudder, but it's really I don't know. It's like if you took like Slacker, I mean, like and made it in, but like with less of a narrative thread of Slacker, and you're just watching that in different animated styles throughout the entirety of the movie. It's really, really cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a mind game.
Mind game. All right. My next one is The Clouds of Silmaria by Olivier Assayas, starring Julia Binoche as an actress who's starring in a revival play that launched her career, but this time she's playing the older woman and not the role she originally embodied. Also starring Kristen Stewart. I'm a big K-Stu fan, especially with Olivier Assayas.
Yeah, it's good. That's really good. Really good.
Yeah.
My next one is 2016's My Entire High School is Sinking into the Sea by Dash Shaw. Have you seen this?
No, but I'll have to.
So he came out with a movie that played at Granbury called Crypto Zoo. Right, yeah. So I didn't care for Crypto Zoo as much as I liked My Entire High School. I didn't dislike Crypto Zoo. It kind of like left me a little cold. But this is basically what you think it is. I mean, it's a earthquake that happens, and then the chaos that ensues when a high school starts to sink into the sea. It's again another kind of visually arresting, different animation style than you're used to. It's completely different than what you would expect going into an animated film, and it's a lot of fun.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, adult animation is not something I seek out, and I'm not opposed to it. I just don't. And so like anytime you're like, oh, have you seen that? I'm probably going to, nope. Okay. All right. So my entry for the Tokyo Godfathers, this one is, well, these next 2 actually are from my childhood.
Oh, so you did 4, I only did 3.
I did 4. Well, then listeners get a bonus from me. We did 4 movies. I wanted to do 4 distinct recommendations. So again, this one is from my childhood and has like sentimental value. And this is Savannah Smiles.
Oh, fucking love Savannah Smiles, man.
Yes.
That's so like.
Yes. Okay. I'm so glad you know this film.
Yeah, no. In fact, when I was doing the quarantine film fest for kids, it was I couldn't get anybody to show up for it because I understand that's a big ask, but Savannah Smiles was going to make my list. It was a staple for me, man. Like that was
too.
And like as a kid, that was one of the only movies that really like. And when I was a young kid, made me tear up.
Oh, it broke my heart. It broke, and I mean, I kept watching it. I mean, because this is when like we had dubbed on like VHS,
right, yeah.
And it just broke my heart like every time, and I would just continue to watch it, right? It's so good.
It's one of those movies that's kind of lost to time. Like it's not like I don't think it's probably very easy to find. And
I didn't even look because I'm like, I can't watch this as an adult. Like one, I'll hate it, or 2, I will just bawl my eyes out, and probably just bawl my eyes out. So.
I will say I did watch it. Yeah, you're probably best to just use your memory. Look, I'm not saying it's bad. No. But as a grown ass man, like a lot of, I mean, it's made for kids. It's intended to be made. Yeah. Savannah Smiles. If you've got young kids, Savannah Smiles, I guess I can't really wholeheartedly endorse it because I don't really know anymore like what's in it. It's about 2 men who.
So it's Savannah is the young daughter and young, right? Like 5, 6.
Yeah.
She's the daughter of only child of an ambitious politician who is much more concerned with running for office than he is about his family. And so she runs away from home and ends up with these two like bumbling crooks, right? One has just broken the other one out of jail, Alvy and Boots. Right? And so they end up forming like this kind of family, right? That none of them had, but they always wanted. And the authorities assume it's a kidnapping, and like you know where this all goes, right? You know how this ends.
As she's like screaming their names as she's driving off in the cop car.
God, right? And then Alvy has that flashback to his like childhood where he finally catches up to the truck, right? And with his cousins. And there's a line Boots says to Alvy, like, I hope they don't tell her that we're bad men.
Right.
And Alvy says, she won't care. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
It's made to tug heartstrings.
Oh,
man.
and there's a puppy. There's a fucking puppy with ice cream.
I think the end song is Savannah Smiles. Like it's like talking about, you know.
Well, it's Smile Savannah one more time for me. The song is stuck in my head. I can still I will not sing it, right? But it is playing in my head right now, and it's very much like one of this, like a song like very much of its time. So if you think of
it's very John Denver, right? I mean, it's like
very much. But also if you think of like the song from Midnight Cowboy or Butch and Sundance, fucking Earworm. Yeah, okay.
My last one is, or my next one. I don't have another one because this is my last one. It's 1981. It's kind of a cheat, but it's 1981's Heavy Metal. An anthology animated series, very influential on a lot of modern day sci-fi. It's about an evil orb, and this is like It's more interesting to watch because of where you can see its influences than it is. I mean, it's a movie to get stoned to and do the sound, blast the soundtrack and just kind of let it wash over you. But it influenced Luc Besson and all these other other directors, and it's kind of a seminal story. So yeah, Heavy Metal. I'm assuming you've never seen Heavy Metal. Yeah.
I mean, but I have heard of it. Okay, all right. So if you like Paprika, you might like 1984's Dreamscape, starring Dennis Quaid as a man who can enter people's dreams. He's recruited by the government to help the president overcome nightmares about nuclear war, but stumbles onto an assassination plot. So you see this matches perfectly with Paprika. Also stars Max von Sydow and Christopher Plummer.
Who's the guy from Warriors? Who's the main baddie?
I forget.
I forget his name too.
It's like a 3-name isn't it? But yeah.
So I had a series. So I try to do, when I do the Real House Foundation at Home Film Fest, I usually try to do like months of the same type of movies. And this was, I showed Dreamscape under the month of kind of forgotten films because of another film that came out in that same year. So this gets totally squashed because of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, sure.
So Nightmare on Elm Street comes out, the whole dream aspect of it all, and then Dreamscape comes out. And Dreamscape doesn't, I don't know what the budget is, but the Dreamscape doesn't look as good now. Obviously, the end scared the shit out of me when I was a kid.
Well, he was like a snake monster.
He was a snake guy, yeah. It's a good movie. Yeah. I really like it. Yeah. It's not a horror film. Quaid's in that kind of inner space, breaking away, kind of like young, douchey kind of guy thing.
So very much, right. Just a younger version of Dennis Quaid.
But it's such a cool concept. It's one of those movies that I never really asked for films to be remade, but in this one where you could have like a bigger budget, it could be really cool. Like to remake Dreamscape and to like kind of put the money behind it and have this idea of us going into people's dreams too. And so the whole idea they're going to do this to kill, to assassinate. Did you already say that? I'm sorry. So assassinated a political figure, and so they're basically weaponizing this. It's really, really fun.
But I also love sort of like the Cold War paranoia too, right? Oh, I can't stop dreaming about like nuclear war.
Right.
It's so great.
The dreams are basically, all the dreams are hellscapes, except for one where Dennis Quaid goes in and has sex with the technician. I guess she's not just a technician; she's a scientist there. But yeah.
But that's another one that was a staple of like my.
Oh yeah,
my
there was
childhood.
a HBO like always on kind of thing. But yeah, so weirdly enough, it really did get squashed by the and just kind of forgotten because Nightmare on Elm Street was so popular, and it basically had a similar premise, obviously. So. Yeah.
All right, well, check out those 7 films, and also more importantly, check out the films of Satoshi Kon. Again, we did not do them justice.
No. There's There's so
but I
much to
never
dig into.
intended to do them justice or do anything justice.
Those are our hot takes. And what was the other thing you said?
Astute observations.
Astute
but I thought that it was
observation.
probably better to say obtuse observations. I'm sure someone out there's like, yeah, very obtuse.
So next time, we're going to bring back Devin Goodman from our Woman King episode. We had mentioned this earlier in that episode about how she had never seen the Star Wars films. We're going to listen to a newbie's take on and answer questions for episodes 4 through 6, and then we'll probably delve into prequels and sequels and things
And
of
Jar
that
Jar
nature.
Binks.
Right? We'll just go. Brock is going to only do the episode in a Jar Jar Binks voice, so stay tuned for that. And then after that, we'll get back into DGG with Undertow and
Snow Angels.
Snow Angels.
Yeah, and I think eventually we're going to take a look at what.
We'll do some new movies. We'll figure out if we can do a Beau is Afraid episode, or if we need to do the whole damn thing as Beau is Afraid. I'm keep waiting for it to come back out for like streaming so I can watch it again.
I know,
because I can't talk about it just on one viewing.
Yeah.
And maybe a few other things, but if you got a suggestion for us to watch, let us know, and maybe we'll throw it in.
Yeah, shoot us a line, right? Say hello. Tell us how you're doing.
Right, yeah.
We will give you free virtual hugs. Other than that, Jason, anything else?
And that's all I got.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Keep screaming.
One more time for me. For one sweet
You have been listening to
smile.
Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time,